Welcome everyone. Welcome to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening science seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus and University of Alaska Fairbanks, UAF, Alaska Sea Grant. And you're in the home office tonight in Nome. We are having a weather event, so I'm thinking there may be quite a bit of people that join in. Which is always good, and this is our first talk of the year. So both UAF Northwest Campus and UAF Alaska Sea Grant, we are both public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. So tonight, like I say, on this stormy night, what a better thing to do than be home, warm and dry, and be able to talk about walruses. So this is going to be a presentation by Joel Garlich-Miller and Dan Bjornlie, both of whom are walrus biologists with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Marine Mammals Management Office, and they're calling in from their homes in Anchorage. So given that, we are going to learn tonight more about what's actually going on. There is this species status review or species status assessment underway. We're going to hear more about that, and we're going to be hopefully sharing our thoughts about what they have to say and our perspectives. And I think Joel was saying he's looking forward to having a little bit of a dialogue. I know I've got questions already. And with that, we will save our questions till the end, unless you are a caller. And callers have priority in Straight Science because it's difficult to be a caller and try to get attention of anybody when you don't have access to all the buttons. So you just come on and ask your question if you're a caller. With that, take it away, Joel and Dan. We're so happy you're here to give us a good presentation on a windy night in Nome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Gay, and welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could join us this evening. My name is Joel Garlich-Miller. I am a walrus biologist, and as Gay mentioned, and we work for Fish and Wildlife Service in the Marine Mammals Office. I've been working on walrus for the past 30 years in Alaska, and it's a pleasure to present to you tonight. Dan, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Yes, my name is Dan Bjornlie, and I'm the program lead for the Walrus and Sea Otter program in Marine Mammals Management, and also working on the walrus biology and the species status assessment that we'll be discussing tonight as part of this presentation.
Thank you, Dan. We may be joined, I can't quite see the participant list, but I think Leah Kenny, who works also for Fish and Wildlife Service, is an endangered species coordinator, and she will, here she is. She may join us to help us navigate any questions about ESA policy and things like that. So, well, please, Leah, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Joel. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Leah. So as Gay mentioned, tonight we're going to talk about a species status assessment. And I'm going to start things off with a high-level overview of some information about the current status and emerging threats to walruses. We're going to be preparing a species status assessment to evaluate the future trends of the walrus population. And this is a document that is meant to inform a decision by the Fish and Wildlife Service whether or not to list walrus under the Endangered Species Act. So we're going to share information about the evaluation process and try to encourage and identify ways that people can contribute information to that process. So let me begin. So our analysis is limited not to global populations of walrus, but the Pacific walrus population. It's a discrete stock. It's ranges across the shallow continental shelf waters of the Bering and Chukchi Seas. It's crosses the international borders of the United States and Russia. So we have a lot of shared management and conservation interest with our Russian counterparts. This is just a crude distribution map encompassing a general range of walrus during the late winter breeding period. When sea ice is socked in the Bering Sea, walruses gather in open water places known as plinias or areas of open water, typically forming south of islands and headlands. And then as the ice breaks up, their range shifts. A lot of females and dependent young move north into the Chukchi Sea, following their treating pack ice. But in the summer, there's a lot of range because a lot of the male walrus remain to the south and occupy coastal haulouts during the ice-free season. Walruses are, of course, a marine mammal. They've got a lot of swimming and diving endurance, but they seem to have to haul out to rest periodically between feeding bouts. And they'll do that either on ice or land. Sea ice is considered particularly important habitat for females with calves. It provides a platform for nursing, access to offshore feeding areas, and isolation from terrestrial predators. Females, as I mentioned, and they're young, generally prefer to remain in ice pack throughout the year. But when sea ice is not available, they can and do use land-based haulouts, or land-based coastal areas we call haulouts. Male walruses appear to have much greater tolerance for hauling out on land and commonly remain in the Bering Sea through the entire ice-free season. A quick snapshot about the current status of the population. Our most recent abundance estimate comes from a 2017 publication, a study that by friend and colleague Bill Beatty and Irina Trukhanova delivered a few weeks back at one of these events. But the resulting population estimate is about 260,000 animals. This estimate is large relative to historical estimates, and the best information suggests that the population is relatively stable at the present time. On hunting, walruses are, of course, an incredibly important subsistence species. They've been hunted for many thousands of years, heavily in the Bering Strait region. They're a very important part of the culture and economy of many coastal communities across Alaska and Chukotka. Harvest levels have changed over time, but recent harvest levels in the United States and Russia are quite low at present relative to historical levels. They're averaging about 4,000 walruses removed from this population per year. This represents less than 2% of our current population estimate, and we believe that's within a sustainable range. Looking to the future, there are some significant environmental changes forecast for the Bering Chukchi Seas that can be expected to influence walrus distributions and abundance. Climate change models, ice models suggest that by mid-century, winter sea ice across the Bering Sea will be greatly reduced, and areas of winter and spring abundance for walruses may shift to the north over time following heavier ice pack, potentially into areas north of the Bering Strait. Now, historically, walruses have spent the summer months in broken ice habitats in the Chukchi Sea, but we've seen a pattern over the past couple of decades. In late summer, the sea ice melts out and off of the continental shelf areas where walruses feed. And walruses have begun to occupy coastal haulouts along the Alaska Chukchi Sea coast and in Chukotka, Russia, for a period of up to a couple of weeks, up to a couple of months in recent years. Walruses at these land-based haulouts appear to spend more energy traveling to find food. There are some concerns that this could affect balance and for reproduction, available for reproduction. And the other concern about the shift in habitat use is disturbance events. There's a lot more activity along the coast. And so a lot of our management actions these days are trying to prevent disturbance events as best we can at coastal haulout sites, because young animals, particularly calves, are very vulnerable to trampling injuries and mortality. So collectively, these factors are expected to put downward pressure on the population. We expect that there will be a smaller population over time, but there's quite a bit of uncertainty about how soon and by how much the population will decline, in part because of ongoing and future conservation management efforts that could potentially influence population outcomes. So how do we plan for these changes? There's some big changes coming. And I've been optimist. I've been called an optimist, but I think it's important to note that the future of the walrus population has not been written at this. There are things that we've identified that we think could shape the future and population outcomes. And you know, in a nutshell, these are trying to protect important habitat areas, allowing walruses to adjust to this new occupancy of coastal haulouts. Trying to reduce mortality there and let them rest. I mentioned earlier, the population is large, healthy, harvest levels are sustainable. They're lower than they have been in the past. If environmental conditions start putting downward pressure on the population, I think managers and subsistence hunters are going to have to work together, make sure harvest levels remain sustainable into the future. And the best and only way we can really sort of tackle these things is collaboratively under a co-management framework. There's a lot of great work going. The Fish and Wildlife Service and the UWC are formal co-management partners, and we have a lot of programs that I would love to come and talk to you guys about at another time about what we are doing. But that is, and maybe if we have time, we can answer some questions about that. So I'm going to invite Dan to give us a brief overview about what the heck is a species status assessment.
Thanks, Joel. So yeah, we'd like to also talk a little bit tonight about the species status assessment, which is a document that we will use to inform the listing decisions on whether or not walruses should be listed as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And that process is currently underway. It began this past fall, and the people working on that are myself, Joel, as well as Leah Kinney, who is on this call tonight, and a few other folks. I think Devin Johnson may also be on this call tonight to answer any questions regarding some of our quantitative work. And we have several other members as well, but that team will put together this document called the Species Status Assessment. It's a process to gather all the best available science information from both Western science, indigenous knowledge, all aspects of walrus biology and status, and try to pass that along to recommenders as at a higher level in the Fish and Wildlife Service on whether or not walruses should be listed. And so we'll go through a few of our slides here. If you want to go to the next slide, Joel, please.
Okay. I'm not sure why it's not advancing. There we go.
There we go. Got it. And we do have Leah here to answer some of the more policy-related ESA questions if we get some of those. But for the general purposes, initially in 2008, walruses were, the Fish and Wildlife Service was petitioned to list the Pacific walrus under the ESA. There was a 90-day finding, a positive 90-day finding, which basically means let's go ahead and evaluate this. And then in 2011, a decision came down that walruses were warranted for listing, but precluded by other higher priority species. And so they were not part of a listing at the time. And then so they were added to a list of candidate species. And then in 2017, walruses, there was this process of species status assessments, which hadn't been really used in the past in the Fish and Wildlife Service, was developed, and that document, the first version of an SSA, species status assessment for walruses, was conducted back in 2017, and that document was then used to help inform a listing decision at that time, and that decision came back as not warranted for listing. And so then the Center for Biological Diversity sued the service because it didn't adequately explain why this changed from warranted but precluded to not warranted. And in the process, the court remanded it back to the service so that we could reevaluate. And so we are currently, the decision within the service was, let's do another SSA, gather more information, because we do have more information since the 2017 SSA was produced. And so we will go ahead and do another one, which will inform a decision coming up in 2025. So go ahead. Thank you, Joel. So currently, the types of information that we have and that we're gathering, as the federal agencies involved in this, Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, we are conducting another walrus research cruise that was similar to the one that was done, that some of you may be familiar with, back in 2013 through 2017, that produced that abundance estimate Joel referenced of about 260,000 walruses. But that's a one point in time number. And so what we would really like to have is a trend. We don't know, is this population increasing or decreasing? We can't really say based on just one number. So we're conducting that shorter version of that cruise, 3 years instead of 5. And so the first cruise effort was last summer, 2023. We'll do another one in June of 2024 and 2025. And so with that, we should have more updated abundance estimate, another updated abundance estimate that will give us some trend data. Unfortunately, that would not be available for us in the timeline that we need for this current SSA. So our abundance estimate of 260,000 will have to be what we work with for this version. But just to give you an idea of what kind of information we as the Fish and Wildlife Service are collecting. And also we're monitoring harvest. We have our marking, tagging, and reporting program. We hope to reinitiate our walrus harvest monitoring program as well, probably not this spring, but next, to be able to do that and more effectively monitor harvest and try to get a handle on the sources of mortality. We're modeling some of the population parameters, especially those that have relation to climate change and sea ice loss, which is, of course, a major factor for walruses. And then also haul out monitoring. We're trying to gather as much information as we can on haul out mortality, haul out disturbance, potential future changes in size and location of haul outs, all of those kinds of data. Next, thanks. But we also have some uncertainties and data gaps that are just difficult because of the location, because of just so many things that go on with trying to monitor a population and their habitats in such a remote, inhospitable place for much of the year. So But the big one, of course, is observed in projected sea ice loss. We can tell that we are seeing reductions in sea ice over time and have for a while. That is projected to continue. The rate at which that continues is still fairly unknown. And so the extent of future sea ice is uncertain. It's likely that with decreased sea ice, we would see increased haul out use. And what does that bring to the status of walruses as far as potential sources of disturbance and mortality, potential changes in food resources due to changing environment within the continental shelf where they feed. Ocean acidification and warming could change some of those food resources as far as abundance, location, things like that, as well as potential things like harmful algal blooms. So, and all those associated effects can and likely will affect the population at some level, and we don't know how much. As Joel mentioned, it's probably probable that the population will be lower in the future than what it is now. As far as how much, we aren't really sure. So, examples of the types of information that we would like to get from communities and people who have connections to walruses and who are, spend time in these areas, walrus hunters and people who just have observations and things like that. What kinds of things are you seeing out there? Are you seeing different trends and locations that are, major shifts from one location to the other? Walruses that are using haul outs in different ways or at different times, timing of movements that may be heading north or south, where the walruses are changing their movements dramatically. Also things like physiology, body condition and health of the walruses that you do see in harvest, or as you're seeing them out in their sea ice habitats. And then also things like changes in habitats that you've noticed along the way, or other factors of potential threats that you think are relevant to walruses in general, walrus population. So I think Joel's got this next one.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Dan. So, yeah, just a few words on, how we can incorporate indigenous knowledge into this status assessment. There's already some published information and reports out there where that have gathered pearls of wisdom and knowledge from the subsistence hunters about walrus behaviors, walrus distributions, abundance. These are citable reports available for incorporation into our species status assessment. A lot of those have been done in partnership with Eskimo Walrus Commission. For example, we held workshops in 2012 when we first started seeing large walrus haul outs on the northern coast of Alaska, and we met with community leaders and elders to strategize how to minimize disturbance. A lot of great advice came out of that, and it was the start of a lot of these stewardship programs that are going on up there now. And Dan mentioned, we've been down this road before. We have a 2000 and an SSA that we did, and one effort we did is we hosted we called it a stakeholder workshop, but we had subsistence users from about 15 different communities across Alaska who spent a couple of days with us sharing information about the resiliency of walruses to climate change, and helping us inform what we call a Bayesian belief model that sort of evaluated the strength of different threats. And it was a pretty productive meeting, and that information was fed directly into a model that evaluated stress on the walrus population. In 2023, just this last summer, we had a really productive workshop in Nome, Alaska, hosted by the Eskimo Walrus Commission, where we had walrus experts from St. Lawrence Island and Nome come share information and dialogue with us. We reviewed a population model, and they helped us fill some data gaps for that model. And so that this model that is under production will be, I think, a key tool in sort of predicting population responses into the future. So that information is treated and informed into this population model. We get a lot of great feedback from what people are seeing in their neck of the woods at annual Eskimo Walrus Commission meetings. There's annual meetings that are held where Fish and Wildlife Service talks about our scientific studies to the commissioners, but the commissioners, it's a roundtable. They also share information and reports about and concerns about things they're seeing on the landscape and successes and challenges with hunting and sea ice and emerging threats like shipping are all things that have been shared at these meetings. We've learned a lot from these interactions. We've learned a lot of critical information about the biology and ecology of walrus, walrus's relationship with sea ice, what we do in the face of sea ice changes. We've heard a lot of knowledge about the resiliency and adaptability of walrus, as demonstrated by the occupation of coastal haulouts when ice is during ice-free conditions and things like that. A lot of documentation of increased shipping, a lot of concerns in places both in Bristol Bay and the Bering Strait region about all the shipping and its potential effects, not just on walruses, but on walrus hunting conditions. And yeah, I mean, it's been tough. People do have good years hunting, but I think there's a general trend where deteriorating sea ice conditions, this is what we've been hearing, are leading to less hunting opportunities for hunters. So it's our intent, to the extent practical that we can, we're trying to treat that information, summarize and treat that information in our species status assessment, and incorporate it into our predictive population model. Dan, I think this is you close us out here.
Yeah, sure. And we may bring Leah in as well to see if she has anything to add. But basically our timeline, like I said, we started this process in late 2023. Where we initiated our kind of put together our team. We set forth with some information gathering process, both internal and external outreach. And now we're working on trying to put some things together while still at the same time reaching out to folks to see what kind of information we may be able to get from Indigenous community, from other colleagues in the state and other federal agencies who may have some information. So we're working on that. We're working on our data analysis this winter and spring of 2024. We'll write our report through this spring and then send it out for review this coming summer. And then this fall, sometime in the September timeline, the recommendation team meeting will happen. And that's what that RTM stands for in this timeline. And though that team is a team of higher level decision makers within the Fish and Wildlife Service, and this report will be presented to this team, and then they have basically the decision at their feet. And so that decision will be made, and it will be written up and published in the fall of 2025. August timeline of 2025 is when that decision would be made public. Leah, do you have anything to add to that before we move on? Did I get that right?
Yeah, the timeline looks good. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. So, future opportunities for input. I don't remember. Joel, were you going to run with this one, or was I? I don't know.
Well, I can speak to it. Yeah, we are under well, it's our policy and our obligation to offer government to government consultation with sovereign tribes of and so we are doing that. We have a meeting scheduled on February 5th, 12:30 to 2:30. We're trying to reach out to all potentially affected tribes about this federal action and provide an opportunity for dialogue and exchange and questions asked about this. I will try to share a poster for that. We just did a mailing today out to all the tribal offices with this invitation. So it's a virtual meeting, but there are options for calling in as well. And then I think we will tentatively plan to hold another meeting again in April if there's interest to do so. And those on the line, you can let your tribal offices know that we're also open to any request for one-on-one consultation at any time on this, on Pacific Walrus or any other federal action. I see a hand raised from Roy. Are we at that point, Gabe?
Well, it's up to you. Is this the end of your presentation, or would you like questions now? We can go however you want to do it.
I think, is there another slide? Yep, there we go.
That's
Okay.
that's
All right.
it.
All
Good.
right. Well,
Thank you.
then Roy Ashenfelter, thank you both, gentlemen. Both Dan and Joel, and for the Straight Science audience, know that we have many callers on tonight, so callers do get a priority. And this is also the time you might want to write in the chat. It's never easy to be a straight science public speaker or a straight science speaker on any occasion. Speaking personally, and you might want to show some love for Joel and Dan for coming tonight and presenting this opportunity so we can ask our questions now and share our perspectives. So Roy is the first one. Go ahead, Roy, with your question. Let's see, Roy. If are you stuck on the mute would be the microphone in the lower left, if that's where your toolbar is. I'll try and unmute you from this end of things. All right, write in the chat if you are still on and are still want your question asked. No worries there. Anyone else at this time until Roy can get back in conversation? I know I have some questions, and I want to thank you, Joel, and thank you, Dan. And I don't know, it sounds like you brought some extras for the questions, so I'm excited about that. And oh, go ahead, Metcalfs. I see you have your hand up.
Hi, Joel and Dan. Thank you for a really good presentation. I just have one question. I know the Fish and Wildlife Service has a tribal liaison. I can't remember her name, but are you hopefully planning to engage her in some of your reaching out to the communities? Because you do have a tribal liaison.
Yeah, and we have, Crystal has been involved in those government to government outreach efforts that we've put together. She's of course incredibly busy working on many other issues as well, and so it's sometimes hard to get her time for all of these things, but we have had her involved in that October call, and we plan to have her as well in our February call as far as outreach goes. We've been working hard to try to get that outreach out ourselves as well.
Thank you very much. And Roy, I know I'm getting messages. Roy, if you can call, my phone is 434-1149, and I can just put you in on the phone this way if you want to speak. I don't understand why it should be. I can't seem to undo you either from my end of things. So unless you want to chat, call 434-1149, and I'll just put you right on the my microphone.
I have a question.
Roy. Okay, so let's do Roy first. And I'm gonna go mute and then, oh no, I can't. Ask your question real loud.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm unable to unmute. But I had a number of questions. I don't know if that's fair. But I heard that the SSA was denied or there was a lawsuit. I heard about that.
Are you saying, can you say that one again to me? Cause I muted.
Yeah, let me just stay away from that one.
Okay.
Let's talk about the abundance.
All right. We want to talk about the abundance? Go for it.
Yeah, the current abundance is high, meaning that even with this climate change, the health of the walrus is there with all this climate change that people are making comments about. The other thing about halite doesn't seem to affect the population. So that, to me, that would be an excellent place to do abundance. And then if you don't have any availability on the food or numbers on the food or quantity of food or quality of food, then you certainly look at the walrus that are hauling out. And then the other question has to do with recruitment, females, males, how many males that it take populate of walrus, and looking at the health of the puppies is a good indicator of whether or not these walrus will continue to survive. So there's a number of different things that I think we don't need to go into the threats yet, so we get answers to what I had commenting about. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Roy. We'll stay on the, oh, he hung up. So he's going to listen to your answer on his channel.
Well, I'll start with maybe I might need some help, but as I apologize, I heard that there's some questions, a comment that the walrus population is quite large at present, and I think that we agree with that. So it's got a good starting point. One thing I'll say that these research cruises are involved in is not just estimating abundance, but is estimating recruitment, the survival of different age classes of animals in the population. So that that can also help inform future trends of the walrus and the changes in we trying to pick up any changes in survivorship of younger cohorts of animals. I'm not sure if there was some more additional questions. Maybe you could paraphrase for us, Gay. If you heard them.
I think maybe there was one, Joel, if you wanted to talk to the using haulouts to estimate abundance, maybe some of Tony's work.
So that's some emerging science with colleagues with U.S. Geological Survey are also pioneering new techniques using remote sensing data collected from satellites And in a nutshell, they're measuring the footprint of walrus haulouts up on the northern coast of Alaska, Chukotka, Russia. And they also have gathered some information about density, how many walruses per square meter there are. And so they're pioneering some work to estimate abundance using this remote sensing technology. Dr. Tony Fischbach is the person, and I believe he presented on this subject a while ago. It's fascinating work. He's doing some also some exploration to see if he could pick up mortality events, signals of carcasses on coastal haulouts. I don't think there's anything definitive if it works yet, but he's been doing some ground truthing in partnership with the native community, the Point Lake community. They could do on the ground surveys for walrus carcasses, and Tony looks for them from space. And so that's very exciting research.
I think there was a question, you may have answered it, and Roy, call me back if you want to, I can relay maybe easier. I think your background sound was on, so there might have been a loop. There was a question about the haul out use, and that the haul outs don't seem to, the increased haul out, jump up and down, Roy, if I'm not saying it right, but the increased, okay, he'll be at a future meeting. The increased haul out use hasn't seemed to hurt the walrus population. And are you guys are looking at the sex ratio? How many males do you need versus how many females you need to keep things in line? If I paraphrase that.
Yeah, I mean, walruses have adjusted remarkably to these ice-free conditions and have been occupying these coastal haulout sites. There are, even though there's a lot of incredible efforts both in the United States and Russia by coastal communities to prevent human-caused disturbances, there are disturbance events that are I don't want to sugarcoat it too much. There are animals dying at these coastal haulout sites. The overall impact at a big population level is still what we're trying to figure out. And so that's what some of these this walrus research crews that we've been doing to look at trends in abundance and changes in survivorship between age classes may help us understand that a little better. I hope that answers the question.
Well, Roy won't be, he'll type it in if it hasn't or not, or he'll see you at a meeting. So here's my question, is the scheduling of things. It looked like on your timeline, you have summertime, all this has to go into, all these research answers have to go in by sometime in the summer. I can't remember your timeline bar there. And then by August, it goes to this RTM or something like that, the decision makers. So my two questions are, will all this data, these research data be available? You know, they'll be done by then? Are they on strict timelines to be done before this decision has to be made? That's my first question. And then the second is, who makes the decision? That's would be a pretty important part of the story, I think, for the Bering Strait region to know who makes the decision on whether, given the best data you got or that we can give you, who makes the actual decision? Thank you.
So as far as the information goes, it's the best available scientific data. And so it's what we have, the best available data we have on hand right now. There are currently projects underway that, you know, like some of the work that we're doing right now with the research crews, there's no way we would have the genetic samples to the lab analyzed and an abundance estimate improved on by the time this SSA has to be completed. And so that unfortunately can't be included in this process. But there are other colleagues. USGS has done some work and trying to do some population modeling, some of the habitat work, some of the information that Tony Fischbach has gathered from some of his satellite imagery data. Some of those things that have been completed to date, those we will be able to use. But yeah, anything that's got a timeline longer than that is unfortunately can't be included to that level.
Okay, so
And
that's important. Thank you. And then
yeah,
who's in the group that makes the decisions? I'm honestly, I never thought about it, but who is the decision makers? Who are the decision makers? Thank you.
yeah, Leah, do you want to jump in
Yeah.
on try to get into that one?
And
Okay.
Leah, who are you again? I'm sorry. If you could
Yeah,
just.
hi, I am a
Okay.
project manager for species status assessments. I'm actually assisting with this one. The project manager, Jonathan JK, couldn't be here this evening, so I'm assisting, and my role is to help with coordination, and project managers, myself and Jonathan, oversee the science and the information that goes into the SSA and helps the team with the SSA, a species status assessment, with that process. So part of my coordination is coordinating with the recommenders, the people that are going to be making the management decision about listing or not listing. Those folks are experts in ESA policy and have a strong background in ESA. So for our region in Alaska, it will be a team of the assistant regional directors for ecological services. And it's a team of folks that review all the science that Joel and Dan and others will be presenting, and then use their knowledge about the ESA to make a decision. And I should say recommendation, because from there it goes to the Fish and Wildlife Services regional director, and that's Sarah Borio, and she also has to agree with the recommendation. And then from there, it goes on to headquarters in Washington. And again, there's another rigorous process to review and agree or not agree with that recommendation.
All right, and the team is like 20 people or 5 people or?
It's small. Yeah, the team is 3 to 5.
3 to 5. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, there is some, there was right off the bat, as you guys were talking, if you could drop a link, one of you, to the 2023 Indigenous Walrus Workshop Report. There was a request for a PDF or a link if that's possible. So thank you for that. And
Well, I'm sorry, it's not quite ready for prime time. It's very close.
okay,
It's going review by all the participants at the that participated, but it's near production, so it'll be available soon. If someone wants to email me their contact information as soon as it's ready, I will gladly send it to them.
okay. Lisa Sheffield Guy was the first one to put that in, but I'm sure just about everybody on here wants a copy of that. So,
Okay.
sign me up as well. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Yes.
And you've got a couple in the chat. So first one is, when are the public comment periods for the species status assessment and the final decision to list or not? When are the public comment periods?
That is a good question, and Joel and Dan, I can go ahead and answer that one. Right, so if there is a decision to list the species as threatened or endangered, when we publish that proposed rule, that goes out in August of 2025. We'll publish our proposal to list, and that's when the public has the opportunity to provide any comments about the information we're using to justify a proposal to list, any new information that we may have not included in our species status assessment. And then we have, from that time that we published the proposed rule, a year to make a final decision. So we take into consideration public comment. We oftentimes have a public hearing as well to discuss with the public our proposal to list, and we take any information in that public hearing into consideration. as to whether or not we go forward with the final decision to list as threatened or endangered.
Okay, and I will, for 1 second, skip over Rob Kaler, but I'm coming back to you, Rob, because Roy is asking a question that probably is more pertinent in line of what we're talking about. And his question is Fish and Wildlife Service already choosing to create an ESA listing? Is there going to be a public meeting in Nome? And that gets back to the original question, which is, when are the public comment periods for the SSA and the final decision? So a lot of interest in public comment periods.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we don't have any decision now, of course. There's no decision yet on whether or not it's warranted. The SSA is still in development, and then the Fish and Wildlife Service has to put their recommendation forward. But like I said, that proposal or that public comment period will be open if we make a decision to recommend listing in August of 2025. And it's usually open for about 2 months. Just in general, the public has the opportunity to provide written comments to us. And then, like I said, we conduct public hearings that would all be scheduled within that time frame as well. So after August of 2025, within that year that we have to make a final decision.
So for, I guess I'll ask is for, just as a follow-up. So then for what I'm hearing is there isn't a public comment period until after a decision is made in August 2025. And it would only happen if it's to list the walrus under ESA?
Yeah, that was correct. If we,
Okay,
the
great.
Fish and Wildlife Service, decide not to list the species, we don't open it up to public comment. We just, that's our decision. And so we would just make it public that we decided that the species does not warrant listing. But
Okay,
if we propose to list it, then we open it up for public comment.
okay. Will there be any meeting beforehand, before August 25? Will there be a public meeting in Nome anyway? Just, it sounds like there's interest, and this is, walrus are all important in this region. Will there be a Fish and Wildlife come up and take comments, or?
I'm not sure, Joel and Dan, if that coordination has been done on your end, or if you know how that would fit in with the timeline.
Well, I can speak in general terms. We have so again, there's two different things going on here. Dan and I are biologists doing an analysis about future conditions. This is the species status assessment. The document itself, it's a bunch of information about walruses, what's likely to its current status, its likely future conditions. It itself is not a decision document. That is another recommendation team and the chain of review and decision makers that Leah laid out takes over at that point. So we're currently in the information gathering phase, and this Strait Science is one opportunity for outreach to gather information to inform the species status assessment. We have a call out which we've directed to tribes, also calling for information. We've invited tribal governments for government to government consultation to discuss these things with us. In general, we do have, we try to do hunter meetings and community-based meetings whenever we're invited to do so. We have tentative plans, certainly, to travel to Gamble and Savona for hunter meetings to discuss the SSA as well as a variety of ongoing management initiatives. And so if there is interest in a meeting, we would certainly entertain it. We would certainly be passing through the community several times this summer. So, happy to participated in the town hall, answer questions about the SSA and anything else walrus related.
Consider yourself invited by Alaska Sea Grant and UAF Northwest Campus. We'd be happy, especially if you're going through to St. Lawrence Island. I see there's a question about whether you're going, and so wonderful you're going both to Savunga and Gamble. Please, we would probably do this kind of a Zoom thing if you wanted to do a town hall. We've done that in the past for other things. So yes, consider yourself invited. If you were worried about that, we'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And there was a question from this house that we have a guest here. And the question is, perhaps for your public comment meeting, you could actually, if it gets to that point, you could use that to provide the status of the listing and then give the updates of the latest research results. So the stuff that you can't include prior to July, but by August or as you're going into these later parts, perhaps you can give us updates if there are some.
Yes, we can do that, and that's a great suggestion to share a summary of the research and data and information.
Wonderful. All right, and then I'm going to go back. I don't see any hands raised other than Roy, and I know you are stuck there, but Rob Kaler asks, regarding food and competition for resources and changes in ocean temperatures, in parentheses, he has more walleye, pollock, and Pacific cod migration northward with the lack of the cold pool or the thermal barrier due to the loss of sea ice that we're having. Are walrus body conditions looking normal? Skinny, chunky, the same?
Well, I'll just comment that this is the sort of information that we can and do seek from hunters out on the landscape. I can't speak for all of them, but what I've heard at recent meetings, such as the 2023 Indigenous Knowledge Workshop, is that at present, body condition, as observed and described by hunters out at landscape, is fairly robust. They're seeing fairly healthy fat walruses, and so you know, I'm sure there are sick individuals and a huge variation in body condition, but in general, that's the impression that I'm getting. This is a very real concern about you know, shifts in the whole ecosystem away from high benthic productivity to different things moving into the environment. But at present, under the current conditions, we aren't seeing a very significant impact as described by hunters.
Awesome. Thanks, Joel, Rob says. Are Alexandrium cysts, and that Alexandrium is the harmful algae that causes paralytic shellfish poisoning, of which this region had a wake-up call in 22 and 23, because it turns out now the water's warm enough for Alexandrium, a toxin, nerve toxin producing algae that affects warm-blooded animals quite a bit. And if you get too much of it, it can cause all kinds of problems and eventually death. And that can affect the seabirds, it can affect the marine mammals, it can affect human beings. And so he's saying, are Alexandrium cysts, which are kind of like the resting little seeds of Alexandrium waiting for warm water to grow and do their thing, associated with paralytic shellfish poisoning in the seed bed? Are they a concern for walrus? And I'm guessing, Joel, that you mean as they're moving the mud and maybe sucking them in?
I do, yeah. Yep, that's right. Like a vacuum, and if they might be exposed to you know, the
toxin.
Yeah, but I guess they haven't really hatched out, Gay. You did a great job explaining the question. Thanks a lot. But yeah, maybe I'm just curious because I know it's been a hotbed for Alexandrium cysts, and then that's where, because walrus. I'm just wondering, Joel and Dan, great presentation, and Leah, thanks for your input too. But yeah, I'm just wondering if they would be more susceptible, or because of the way they feed, or it's not a concern. So thanks.
You want me to take a stab at that?
Well, Gay, I was going to say that, Gay is probably a more knowledgeable expert on this subject than I am. I'll say that it is certain harmful algal blooms, and certainly the high levels that have shown up in recent environmental surveys and in testing of walruses and walrus samples. They certainly are getting exposed, and so yeah, that's one thing we'll have to grapple with. I'm not sure we're there with any sort of population level effects, but it is an ongoing concern. And Gay, please share your knowledge.
Well, thank you for this particular question, which is when you have the algae, the bad kind of algae, Alexandrium, and we want algae. We got lots of good algae, and our animals have been living with low levels of Alexandrium for years. It's just that now we see we can get a large amount rather quickly, a world-class large amount, dangerous large amount very quickly. So in this question, though, I think he was asking when they are not growing anymore, they kind of turn into a seed stage and just go to the bottom. At that point, I can't safely answer that they have no toxin on board, but my guess is that has never been a concern raised for people. If you get cysts in your mouth or something like that, or anything that might eat cysts, so in the mud. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. Unsure, but it's never been raised. So thank you, Rob, for a good question. The one thing that is of interest is that walruses, as they're feeding and blowing the mud and feeling with their whisker pad through the mud for the little necks of clams and for upa, tunica, whatever they can, worms, whatever they can get, they are actually stirring up the mud if it's very muddy. And so if you have a lot of these seeds in the mud, one of the questions is, would walrus themselves, just by feeding on their good foods, would they be stirring the seeds back up into the water column, get picked up into the current, and get back up into the sunlight up above? So that's what I've heard about cysts, but I've never heard about ingestion problems. And Rob's got another question. And the audience, I know we've got lots of callers, so if you want to unmute or call or text me at 434-1149 your question, we can do it that way.
Sorry, I didn't mean, actually, that was my next question.
Oh.
Exactly. Do walrus stir up sediment, and is that
Yes,
put
they
it
do.
into the water column? I guess, and unless this was already touched on and I missed it, but the Russia and genetics with Russia, do you guys believe that the Russian population is kind of same? I know the Bering Strait is nearest neighbor isn't that far away, so the Russian population, genetic wise, if it does get listed as a species.
Yeah, our current framework for analysis is treating this as a single panmictic population. They certainly range across there. And there might be some groups that don't intermix all that much, but the genetics has not shown them to be a separate stock. We were asking the question, and I think there's a nearby population of walruses, the Laptev walrus, and some questions about whether it's genetically distinct from Pacific walrus. There's some conflicting, some new genetic information that suggests they maybe not so distant, but I think functionally they are still separated. Who knows what will happen as the sea ice continues to disappear. But our unit of analysis for this purpose is walruses that range, across the Bering and Chukchi seas. I mean, we do get some animals that spill into the Beaufort during the summer months, but yeah, that's what we're analyzing our stock unit as.
So thank you, Joel. I guess my question would be, and people put your hands up or put it in the chat, because this is a good time to be able to ask questions. And I guess my question is, given that we're all one walrus, one Bering Strait, do you guys have good transboundary data. I know it's tough now because we have the whole situation with our two countries, but are you able to get or have going into this review? Do you have good information, since really walruses are more a Russian animal in their waters, so to speak? Do you have good information for that large segment of the population from the Russian side?
Well, with walrus, everything is difficult. We do. We have a lot of great historical information. We have a history of collaborations with Russia up until the Ukrainian invasion. So they were peers and partners on some of our previous abundance survey estimates. There's some good information, almost better than the United States, of haul-out monitoring that occurred at least until the early 2000s about numbers and mortality rates. Fortunately, that stuff is all published in literature, and we've got an excellent colleague and staff member, Irina Trukhanova, who Russian speaker and intimate, just gets a lot of great information and can find all the government reports about harvest levels and stock. So that information is out there and will be incorporated to the extent that we can find it.
All right. We do have a message text in from St. Lawrence Island, and that question was a follow-up on the harmful algae, and that is, can we humans get immune to the bad algae toxins? And all the available literature, the sort of science that has been reviewed and checked over, says no. In Alaska, in Southeast Alaska, there are some people who have different thoughts on that, but that's a really good question, and I would not answer that other than to say that to the best of my ability, you cannot get immune to the algae toxins. And these are a nerve toxin. So when you eat something that either directly, like a clam will have it all in the stomach, you know, if you haven't really cleaned it out, or maybe, and there's research being done on this, the intestine itself in a walrus, if he has a high load of this in his feces, his unuk, then what do we know about eating the intestine, which is good food? So those are being looked at. So this is a tricky topic, harmful algal bloom, and we will be talking about this later in the year in this series. So stay tuned for that, and really good questions. You can also call me on the same number too, if you want to have any other questions on that, please. I'm going to circle, hopefully that helped. I'm going to circle back to the chat where Jackie Grebmeyer goes to the cyst issue and says, I think the cyst issue, the seed stage of the little algae that we don't like, Alexandrium, I think the cyst issue is probably relevant for being consumed by clams that are consuming older algae, older plant-like material in the surface mud. But there have not been any specific studies that I know of. And I agree with Jackie there. It's real sort of a good question that I can't answer, and she's not able to either right at this time. Hang on, Jackie, I'm having a little technical difficulty. However, if the clams consume the seeds or the cysts, any toxin could then be enhanced in the clams as shown in HAB studies and then consumed by walrus. So Jackie, are you saying there's biomagnification going on in a clam from the cysts?
Yeah, it's a possibility of that, Gabe. That's what I was saying, is because
Okay.
we do see that on the HAB studies we've done, that have been done, that we've collected samples for. They're hotter in certain areas, and so they're consuming them. You know, it could be when it's the bloom,
Yeah.
or it could be they're doing it over the winter time on those seabeds, and we don't have an answer.
We don't have an answer. So thank you for that thought. That's a good one. And for that final answer, which is we don't know. And that seems to be for harmful algal blooms. That is our mantra, but very good. Thank you for that point bringing in. The next is when Lydia was explaining the ESA, the Endangered Species Act decision, she mentions the writers consider all the quote unquote science. How will indigenous knowledge be considered by this high level group? Do they only consider published research? Good question.
Well,
And
I
Leah,
guess
that might have been you. I don't know Lydia. I don't
Yeah.
see a Lydia.
I think yeah, I'll speak first. I think it's the decision makers is what the question is. Are they going to give deference and treat indigenous knowledge in this? Is as I understand the question, and I think as a policy,
How, I guess, is the question. How will indigenous knowledge be considered by this high level group? Do they only consider published research? Good
Yeah.
question.
Well, I think our challenge as SSA writers will be to to present the. There is a lot of published literature with that includes indigenous knowledge and including this 2023 Indigenous Knowledge Workshop we have, several other reports. So that stuff is available and is treated peer to peer with Western science and things like that. For information that we're soliciting now through this forum here and feedback from tribes and things like that, it'll be our goal as SSA writers to present that information, summarize it in the SSA for the decision makers. I do believe the decision makers have encouraged us to go out and seek indigenous knowledge to help get a well-rounded report. And so I hope that, I don't know if that answers the question. It's our job as SSA writers to include all of that indigenous knowledge and summarize it for the decision makers. The decision makers aren't restricting us to currently published information. They're encouraging this outreach that we're doing tonight.
Metcalfs have unmuted. Is there a follow-up?
Well, we're here talking about it, and we understand, and we have, because we know Joel and Dan, and I know they appreciate and understand and know how to incorporate indigenous knowledge. I think what we're kind of wondering is, once the SSA is done, is that the sole source of all the information that the ESA writers consider? And will they honestly consider IK as much as you might?
Yeah, please, if you have something to share.
Sure, I can add to this that, yes, we just finished a recommendation meeting not too long ago for the Alexander Archipelago wolf in Southeast Alaska, for which we also did incorporate a lot of indigenous knowledge. And in that recommendation team meeting, and for all recommendation team meetings going forward, we treat indigenous knowledge just the same as we would science or any other resource or information. So there's no separation in terms of the value or the credibility of those two different sources of information. I think that's the simplest answer, is that indigenous knowledge has a place right there at the table with Western science.
Great, thanks, is the response. That's good. All right, Orville. Hi, Orville. Orville Tooley says, just a comment. We got a wide open water out there, and there are big herds out there, and they are feeding. If you want samples, if the hunters go out tomorrow, I'll ask some of the captains. I would say yes, Orville. Anything now is what these guys need. We all need the best available information. And if that means intestine or whatever that with UNIC in it for the harmful algal bloom, if that means whatever they're looking for, I think that's and we've got Eskimo Walrus Commission Director right here online. So Joel or Vera, do you want to answer that question from Orville?
Well, yes, I mean, samples are helpful, and I'm afraid we haven't distributed kits, but through this opportunity, there some of the ongoing research studies that would benefit from samples as an ongoing study of harmful algal blooms, and we can provide some sampling guidance on that. And Gay would be an excellent contact and facilitator for some of this. We are also seeking small tissue samples for genetics. We'd want to know the age and sex of the harvested animal as well. If we could follow up offline or tomorrow, Orville, I would be very grateful to try to take advantage of any sampling opportunities.
And this is Vera. I really appreciate the information that Orville shared, because that's firsthand visual knowledge that these hunters have. And I believe if folks can also take pictures or document these kinds of information, that would be wonderful. I think that would add a lot of information to the things that we will be addressing in the next couple months, because visuals, we're visual people. We like to see things, and that would really help a lot. So thank you, Orville.
And Orville, I would say give me a call too, because what we're looking for goes into a Ziploc bag or a bread bag or anything you got, and you can freight collect intestine with uncleaned. Freight collect bearing air to me with my cell phone number, and will give me a call, 434-1149. Absolutely. And thank you. And I think what's really important too for everyone listening is that if you see something unusual, you know, not only just the good normal stuff, which is what Vera wants and these guys, and that is absolutely important. But right now, the issues on walrus are coming at all sides. So good, bad, or ugly, document it, right? We've got, you know, good Lord, we had that. Anyway, we have issues. We have disease issues. We have toxin issues. We have whatever it is. So if you see something unusual, photograph it. Let somebody know, not just walrus, but anything, honestly, at this point. And if you see something good, let us know that, let these gentlemen and your Eskimo Walrus Commission know that things are good or not. Communication is the way we're all going to get through and give walrus really the best status review, which they very much deserve, to get the best, the real foot forward with all these politics. So, and so thank you for that. Question is in the chat. Has the walrus range changed with warming ocean conditions, similar to some seabirds? That is, new reports of tufted puffins breeding at Wrangel Island in the Chukchi, northern Chukchi Sea in the past 10 years. Is it possible vessel traffic, that is those big 900-foot, 1,000-foot LNG ice-capable tankers, breaking ice in the winter? Is it possible vessel traffic breaking ice in the winter impacts walruses? Thank you.
These are great questions. Yes, I think there's some broadly over the last, well, my career, 30-year career here in Alaska, and even a few decades before that, we've seen a general shift in walruses moving northward, you know, following the ice-associated species. So we've seen the abandonment of some haulouts in the Kamchatka coast of Russia. Numbers in Bristol Bay, Alaska are also down. They're still occupying the area, but I think that you've seen a general pattern of male walrus, particularly moving northward and occupying even Chukchi haulouts sometimes in late summer. So that is definitely. Walruses adjust their distribution abundance on an annual basis, depending seasonal and annual basis, depending on sea ice concentrations. But the overall pattern of diminishing ice pack is changing walrus distribution, and then perhaps the biggest one is the complete shift in habitat use patterns from occupying floating pack ice habitats juxtaposed over the continental shelf region to coastal areas. So the haulouts are not new up in Chukchi. They've been occupied before, but in general, they're having a much greater dependency on those things. So yeah, it's ice go, so go the walrus. I'll tell you, when we did our 2017 SSA, we did not foresee that there would be nuclear powered icebreakers operating year round through the Bering Strait region, southern Chukchi Sea areas important to walruses. So that is a emerging concern, about what potential impacts shaping that habitat and disturbances to females and young and things will be. I think it is something that we will have to consider in our species status assessment. I don't have. Oh, go ahead, Kate. You had something to.
I was just going to say your comment about where goes the ice goes the walrus. Has anyone in your research community looked at, in the Bering Strait region, you can have walruses here 12 months of the year. And we have big haulouts in Bristol Bay, big haulouts still, and haulouts that are on the north shore of the Gulf of Anadyr, right? Meech and Spit and so forth and so on. Those are not ice covered in the summer, and there's no ice around. And the pups are with the females, and they're all on the beach and moving around. And so it looks like walruses do spend ice-free time okay in our region. Has that been looked at or documented? Or I'm just ignorant nowadays of some of the latest reports coming out, but that's a good example of ice-free, and you got females and young feeding near shore. I don't know if there's any information, but is that something that's you guys have a handle on?
Well, I probably
Can help you with it.
are familiar with probably the same Russian literature describing those haulouts in females and dependent young using them in the Gulf of Anadyr. And certainly, yeah, you're right. And that's been going on for a long time. I think my recollection is that the numbers at Meech and Spit and Reuter Spit are also down. I think a lot of those animals are now occupying areas north of the Strait. But yeah, if there is new information, since we had some colleagues that were doing some work there in the mid to late 90s, and I think that may be the most recent literature we have about haulout studies in Bering Sea haulouts in Russia.
Gulf of Anadyr, yeah. Thank you very much. We have a question came in on the text from Gamble, Native Village of Gamble. I apologize if I may have misheard or misunderstood any information that was already given. But my question is, with the data that has been collected, do we have a percentage rate of survival for any given calf to grow into independence? Thanks in advance. So that's a survival rate.
Yeah.
Do we have a percentage rate of survival for any given calf to grow into an independent, walrus on his way. Thanks in advance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't not sure, unless my friend and colleague Devin is on board. We have theoretical survival rates, and we have some data about age classes that we observe in free-ranging walruses to answer those sort of questions about survivorship between age classes. So we will be looking at that. I wish I could tell you what it was. The big concern that the petitioners for listing the walrus have are that survival rates, particularly juvenile survival rates, are under attack and downward pressure due to changing habitat use patterns, both direct mortality and also energetic balance issues with our animals from shore able to get enough energy to feed their calves. So there is some concern that those may change over time. I don't have the data at my fingertips, so I'm sorry if I'm failing there.
But you have Devin pop up, so maybe Devin, what would you like to add to this, if anything? I don't know.
I'll call a friend.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I don't have the data at my fingertips either, but I can tell you that the most recent age-based survival rates that we currently have are from the last round of research cruises, which cover the years from, I think, 2011 to 2017, within that range. And those survival estimates were published in 2018 as part of a demographic model our USGS colleagues put together. So they published different survival rates for different age classes. So from calf to 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, up to adulthood. And we use that information to build, it's called a cumulative survival curve. So now we're entering the sort of the nitty gritty of our model, but that's the information that we're currently using in our population model.
So how are calves doing, if you can say? Is it look like in your model, which is an attempt to sort of best guess what's going on? Do calves have a high survival rate or a low survival rate? Is that even a question I can ask you?
So this paper that was published in 2018 looked at these survival rates over time as well. So in the historical record back to the 1980s. So it was sort of looking at a trend in survival rates, at least from the 1980s to around 2015. And yeah, it was an upward trend in calf survival up to 2015 anyway.
At least up to 2015. So that's a good thing. That sounds like calves survive. So at least from then to 2015, and then you're working on that now. Another one?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that will be part of the data that comes from the current series of research cruises.
Okay.
Which I don't think will be, it'll be a couple of years until we get that all, until we get all the data and are able to analyze it. But
it won't be in the review. Okay. Well, thank you. And caller from Gamble, I hope that answered or got you an answer from people here. Samsung was writing, I'm just sharing that some harvest packers have visual knowledge of cyst pulps that develop in the intestines of walruses and are removed before packing them away. Photos would be helpful sources of info from packers. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. A picture nowadays does really truly speak 1,000 words. And any photos you can get of the unusual are super helpful for everybody. Super helpful. Thank you for sharing that as well. That's very good. Thank you, Samsung. All right. How are you guys holding up? We're at 8 o'clock. You guys okay? I've got a couple more.
Yeah, this is Cheryl. I got a question.
Hey, Cheryl, go ahead.
I know they've collected data from up to 2017 is what they were saying. There was a 6-year gap starting last year. They started collecting research again or doing research again. If our walrus get placed on the endangered list, will this impact our harvest? And it plays a lot into our food, and we don't have jobs. The state of Alaska's dropped the ball. We are more and more on food shortage. Is if it's going to be placed on the endangered list and affect our harvest, and no changes are made throughout different ways of getting food to our people are going to starve. And is there something to plan for such thing?
Excellent question, Cheryl. I was just going to start to turn on to that. What happens when if they become listed? So you bring up
and
a really good point on the harvest.
And with it being healthy, and then a study not being done for 6 years, and then all this push to get them on the endangered list, or recommend for them to be placed on the endangered list again without recent with that gap in the 6 years of information.
Very
Thank
good
you.
question. Yep, very good question, Cheryl. So I guess the question is, what does it mean if you have the animals listed for the harvest?
Well,
And I have another question following that.
I'll try to field that. I know there's a lot of anxiety and concern in the subsistence community about what a listing would do for their subsistence use of walruses. It's justifiable concern. I guess the policy-wise, the big law-wise, is that in essence, first of all, I must emphasize that walruses are not listed. We are so we are talking hypothetical. We're doing analysis to determine that. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. There's our last go around suggested that was not warranted. We've been asked to redo it and consider any and all new information. Go through the process again, and we will. So there's no move to try to list them or anything. We're trying to look at a pure analysis of fresh look at the science to inform that decision. But hypothetically is the question. If walruses were to be listed, first of all, it's important to point out that subsistence hunting is something that is permissible under the Endangered Species Act. So there wouldn't necessarily be any sort of legal pressure to halt walrus hunting. That's in a very broad sense. I think I've spoken with many hunters and hunter meetings. I think that there's a very real concern about the perception. Walruses are special in that people also generate a lot of income from the manufacture and sale of handicrafts and things like that. And the EWC and others are fighting battles about, restricted markets of ivory products and things like that, out of concern that that harvest levels may not be sustainable. And so an endangered species thing could, there's a public perception issue about, if it's endangered, our harvest level sustainable. So I think, we just have to share information. Right now, harvest levels are sustainable, and we're working through co-management structures to try to demonstrate that, and so hopefully that information would also be out there as well. There would be no. I see you want to share something, Gay. So please go ahead.
Just to help you out. So hypothetically speaking, we know they're not listed yet. If they were to be listed, what would be the process, or is there a process by which harvest would indigenous use would be limited? And if so, what does that process look like? Do we know for a harvested ESA animal that's of such importance? And then I would add on, ivory carving, all the other regulations, but let's focus on the harvest right now. Is there a process that we can like look at and say, oh, okay, so this is what it might mean? Do we have that kind of a
Yeah, I perhaps not.
guidelines?
I'm not sure I'm fully comfortable answering that just because
Okay, that's
we don't-
okay.
But other examples might be a parallel is a polar bear is listed is threatened, and subsistence hunting occurs there as well. I think under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, there are provisions if the population becomes grossly depleted and harvest levels appear to be unsustainable. There are some mechanisms by which restrictions could kick in. But these are extreme hypotheticals. At this point, harvests are completely sustainable, and change classification wouldn't necessarily trigger it unless harvest was demonstrated to be a significant impact to the population.
Okay, and we don't mean to make you uncomfortable with these questions, but maybe it's something to take home is the message maybe for Leah, since she's, people here are really going to want to know before, during, or after this process, what are the implications? Just like Cheryl said, what do we have to prepare for if something, we're not saying they're being listed, but if we need to prepare, this region needs to prepare for that. And the question then that I would add on, besides the harvest process of what that means, what are the guarantees and what tipping point is it before things get to a quota or something like that in the way down the line, hopefully. But the other question would be ivory sale, handicrafts, tagging ivory, right? So then it becomes, there's a whole series of things besides harvest that are very important to people's income. What does that mean? Not just, and not, we have gift stores, does that mean they have to, so there would be a large amount, not just the communities that are actually harvesting, but like a community like Nome, that is got other people involved in walrus, absolutely. Not in the harvest per se, but in a whole other realms of, maybe you want to go see a walrus or whatever it is. So there would be really helpful to know down the line. I know you guys can't answer that here, but to have ready for everyone, maybe what happens to these other aspects of walruses products, their life, that sort of thing that will impact all the people of this region, everybody. And the harvest is huge. That's human food. That's a food security issue. So that's why that one comes right up to the top. But there's a whole bunch. So maybe a suggestion would be to have preloaded for whenever your next public meeting is, what it might look like. Because I think that was a really excellent question, Cheryl. How do we prepare? Good, bad, or ugly? And it may never come to it, but we should be preparing ourselves, I think, is a good way you put that. Thank you. So I hope that helps. Thank you, Leah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for answering or addressing, my concern. Because a lot of times, things hit and then we're not prepared. And like I said, throughout the years, we've had food shortages. A lot of time the island doesn't get any help with FEMA or wherever, the food shortage applies for to get food. We did 1 year and we never did again with poor hunting conditions, poor spring hunts and so forth. But this would be something we would be most definitely able to start preparing for should this, take place in the future. So our people will have food security.
Excellent point. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sharing.
All right. Wow. We are past 8 o'clock. If anyone has any other questions, I would blurt them out now or raise your hand or throw them in the chat. I think probably we've kept Joel and Dan and Leah on the hot seat, and they've been doing a great job answering all these good questions. I hope you guys have gotten learned some things and hear the people of the Bering Strait region. So
I have a question, Guy. Hey, Gay.
Yeah.
There's when we have after that Fukushima, we were given awareness of the food chain and what may affect down the food chain, and it's important to learn the time frame of the current flow and how much time it took to flush it out or stuff like that, or whether it'll stay in the environment. And I know just from our harvests and experiences, we've seen some changes in the mammals during that time. But I know now because the walruses eat clams, and it takes about 5 to 10 years for clams to lifespan. And then some of the animals, such as big whales, krills, other cocopods and other things, they only live up to like 6 months to a year. So that kind of flushed everything out. Seems like even with a little bit of accumulation or something that we've been reading about from some of the things that may affect the mammals, I think it's important for you guys to keep sharing informations like when something major happens, so that I know that we were given like different PCB levels and stuff like that, and when a list of the game was shared with us. So I just wanted to point out on that time frame, it's important to learn how much time it would be able to flush out if it's able to flush out.
Excellent. And that's a food safety question, and it's a good one. And that is, I'm sure you guys, do you want to answer that? Do you have an answer for or is that a comment, Edwin, just to keep making sure we're looking at the food safety in walrus bodies?
I think your profession would better explain the information I'm sharing.
Okay. I just put for you in the chat, there is something about when you said Fukushima, my ears went right up for that. Know that for the timeline for Fukushima, which occurred in the spring of March of 2011, it was actually Gamble. And I just was helping move the samples, and there was lots of people involved. But Gamble was the one that, and Savunga, that said, hey, man, this is coming right our way. And there's no one in the government that I tried that wants to help, that normally publicly measures radiation in the water. And so we did this little Gamble provided samples. It was Gamble's Momentum, and they actually found the Fukushima plume. And I think you'd have to open that right now. I'm in the middle of this, but I think it was 2018 that we'd been sampling prior to that. And then 2018, yes, Gamble, St. Lawrence Island, found the Fukushima plume arrival, and it was very, very low, but it was there. It was. And so yes, Gamble and St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, St. Lawrence Island are in the forefront of always wanting to get at food safety, food security, even when some of these bigger agencies have no way of doing it. So I would say, yes, I hear you. Yes, contaminants are a super concern, and hopefully that little thing on Fukushima will let you know that St. Lawrence Island is the ones that had the forethought and did the work to make that, for Fukushima, find it and find that it wasn't they found it and it wasn't as exciting, which was good news. But yes, now they're dumping the Fukushima water again. So, you know, it would be nice to keep that little sampling effort going. But there's an example of food safety
I know,
taken in.
excuse me,
by
I know we
St.
were
Lawrence
given
Island.
like, yeah, I know we were given like 2 to 5 years before that we may see some things that of the contamination that might arrive. And even during that year, some of our harvest, you know, we noticed because those mammals travel and, you know, they go to different places and they probably find a hot pool somewhere, you know, so. But 2018, that's the number that I'm looking at, you know,
Okay,
from
so
your
2018.
sharing. So, okay.
There you go. And it was a good job on St. Lawrence Island's part. So now we have that piece of the pie for that right up until 2018 or maybe 2019. Can't remember. We need to keep that going. Thank you, Edwin. All right. Any other questions? It looks like you guys get to go home after all. Actually, Dan and Joel, if you want to stay on just a sec afterwards, that would be great. And next week, Strait Science is going to be a woman flying up. It's going to be in person and online. Her name is Elizabeth Seiden. She goes by Ebet, and she is in charge of writing up the NOAA ecosystem status reports. One, we'll learn what that is. It's where they compile all these research efforts and what they have to say about the health of the northern and southern Bering Sea when they go to the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. So that's something that she's going to tell us more about, and also tell us what the 2023 sort of comprehensive results were for the northern Bering Sea. So that will be Thursday night, 6:30. So that's January 17th. And as soon as I make the poster, I'll send it out to everybody. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all, everybody. Have a good night. Stay safe with the
Thank
weather.
you. Thank you for
Thanks, everyone.
your time.